Story 1. The Lantern's Whisper. In the dead of night, deep in the heart of the ancient forest, there hung a lantern. Not just any lantern. This one glowed with a cold, bluish flame that never flickered or faded. The locals called it the Lantern's Whisper because, whenever it appeared, those who followed its light heard faint murmurs, like voices carried by the wind. No one knew who lit it or why it appeared, but everyone who saw it vanished before dawn. Old folklore spoke of souls trapped between worlds, doomed to wander the woods forever, their lantern guiding others to join them. One rainy October night, a young man named Caleb, drunk on bravado and alcohol, decided to chase the lantern. He stumbled through the trees, heart pounding, ears straining for those whispered voices. The lantern moved effortlessly, always just out of reach, gliding between the gnarled branches. Caleb's footsteps slowed as the voices grew louder, not whispers now, but agonized screams and desperate pleas. Suddenly, the ground beneath him gave way. Caleb fell into a pit lined with ancient bones, his lantern flickering in the distance. Above him, shadows gathered, eyes gleaming with hollow hunger. The last thing Caleb heard was the lantern's whisper, cold and final. Join us.
Story 2. The Hollow Child. The old house at the end of Ash Street had been empty for decades. When the Harpers moved in, they were warned never to look into the nursery window at night. But curiosity drew Emma there. Through the cracked glass, she saw a small child sitting silently on the floor, pale and still, eyes wide and dark. The next morning, the neighbors said the child had died there years ago, a boy named Samuel who had vanished one cold winter night. No one ever found his body. As days passed, Emma heard faint giggles and the soft patter of little feet. She woke to find tiny handprints on her bedroom mirror, smeared in something dark. One night, the hollow child appeared at her bedside, whispering, "Come play." Emma's reflection in the mirror twisted into a hollow void, and then she was gone. Story 3. The Crawler Below. Beneath the city, in the maze of abandoned subway tunnels, a creature with dozens of eyes and writhing legs slithered silently. It fed on the terror of trespassers. Jake was a graffiti artist chasing a thrill. One night, his flashlight caught a glimpse of too many eyes blinking back at him. Trapped in the tunnels, he heard the creature's many legs skittering closer, its wet breath fogging the air. His screams echoed off the cold walls. The last thing Jake saw was the crawling mass enveloping him, countless limbs pulling, tearing. Story 4. The Mirror's Game. Grandma's antique mirror was beautiful but cursed. Every night the reflection changed, showing a twisted version of the room where shadows lurked. Mia's reflection smiled when she didn't. It blinked when she kept her eyes shut, and one night it reached out. When Mia's hand met cold glass, it was pulled in, replaced by the sinister doppelganger, grinning with too many teeth. Story 5. The Harvest Man. Every autumn, as the cornfields turned gold, the scarecrows would move. No one dared stay out after dusk, for the Harvest Man was watching. He wore a mask woven from corn husks and eyes like burning coals. Those caught in his gaze vanished, their bodies left drained and twisted among the stalks. Tom thought it was a legend, until he found a scarecrow staring at him, its smile carved into a jagged gash. Story 6. The Dollmaker's Curse. In a forgotten village, an old dollmaker crafted toys said to hold the souls of children who angered him. Mackie. Anna found one of his dolls in the attic. At night, it whispered secrets, and its eyes followed her. When children in town started disappearing, Anna realized the dolls were alive, hungry for new playmates. Story 7. The Faceless Bride. On her wedding day, Eliza vanished from the chapel, leaving only a blood-stained veil behind. Years later, travelers reported seeing a bride wandering the nearby woods, a woman with no face, her skin smooth and blank like porcelain. Those who looked upon her too long felt a cold emptiness grow inside them, like their very identity was being stolen. The faceless bride was searching, but no one knew for what. One foggy night, a lost hiker stumbled into her path and never returned. Story 8. The Shrieking Marsh. The marsh was silent, except at night when terrible screams echoed across the black waters. Locals claimed a creature lived beneath the mud, half man, half beast, trapped for centuries by a broken curse. Tom and his friends dared to camp near the water's edge. When the shrieks began, a foul stench filled the air and something rose, slimy, clawed, and snarling. One by one, the campers disappeared, pulled under by unseen hands dragging them into the depths. Story 9. The Whispering Dolls. In a dusty attic, a collection of old dolls sat motionless. But at night, they whispered secrets, arguments, and threats. Lily's grandmother warned her never to touch them, but curiosity won out. That night, the dolls' voices filled her dreams, begging, pleading, then screaming. By morning, Lily was gone, leaving only the dolls, their glass eyes glinting with something dark. Story 10. The Last Passenger. The midnight train was almost empty when a stranger boarded at the final stop. No one remembered seeing him step on, only the sudden chill that filled the car. Passengers began to vanish one by one, their screams swallowed by the roar of the rails. The last survivor looked out the window to see a twisted, grinning face staring back. The stranger had worn their skin. Story 11. The House on Black Hollow Road. No one who stayed overnight in the abandoned house on Black Hollow Road ever left sane. The walls whispered secrets and shadows moved without source. When Jake took a dare to spend the night, the house toyed with his mind. Faces appeared in mirrors, hands reached from cracks, and the floor pulsed beneath his feet. By dawn, he was a hollow shell, murmuring the house's dark secrets to anyone who would listen.
Story 12. The Wendigo's Hunger. Deep in the frozen northern woods, the legend of the Wendigo was whispered among the elders. A gaunt, towering creature with glowing eyes and a ravenous hunger for human flesh and souls. Ben and his hunting party were stranded after a blizzard buried their cabin. Days passed, and food ran low. They heard distant screams, guttural growls, and the crunch of brittle bones underfoot. One by one they vanished. Ben saw it at last, pale skin stretched tight over protruding ribs, antlers crowning its skull, and a mouth dripping with blood. The Wendigo circled, hunger burning in its eyes. It would not stop until all were consumed. Story 13. The Swamp's Breath. The swamp was alive, not with animals, but something older. It breathed through the murky waters and reached with grasping vines. Fisherman Rob ignored warnings and waded too deep. His screams echoed as the water boiled and a hulking, moss-covered beast emerged, dripping slime and mud. Its limbs twisted like gnarled roots, eyes glowing like embers beneath a tangled mass of algae. The swamp monster pulled Rob beneath the water, its breath reeking of decay, dragging him into the cold, dark depths where no one could hear his cries. Story 14. The Hanging Man. On a lonely country road stood an ancient oak, its branches twisted like claws. Locals told of a man who hung there, decades ago, cursed to swing endlessly, seeking revenge. Late one night, a group of teenagers dared to pass beneath it. The wind carried creaking groans, and shadows gathered. One of them vanished, replaced by a hanging, faceless figure whose fingers dripped with fresh blood. The curse fed, growing stronger with each soul it claimed. Story 15. The Silent Fog. A thick fog rolled into town, swallowing streets and muffling sounds. People disappeared without a trace. A reporter named Sarah chased the fog to its source, an abandoned factory. Inside, the fog whispered names, promising secrets. She found a strange mirror reflecting the mist, and as she touched it, her body turned cold and translucent. Sarah became part of the fog, an eternal watcher waiting to claim the next victim. Story 16. The Shadow Under the Bed. Every night, Max felt something crawl beneath his bed, a shadow with claws and glowing red eyes. One night, Max stayed awake, clutching a flashlight. The shadow lunged, its breath icy and foul. Be a man, and it tore into his skin, sinking claws deep. Max screamed, but no one heard. By dawn, only a bloody stain remained, and the shadow waited for the next child's room. Story 17. The Lantern Ghost. Every night at dusk, the old lighthouse keeper's lantern flickered on its own. Legend said the keeper, Edgar, drowned trying to save a ship during a storm, but his spirit remained, forever searching the dark waters. A curious visitor named Anna decided to spend the night. At midnight, she saw a pale figure clutching a lantern, wandering the cliffs. His hollow eyes locked with hers, and she felt an overwhelming sadness, and a cold hand grip her wrist. She tried to scream, but Edgar's ghost whispered, "Stay, lost with me." Anna's body was found days later, pale and lifeless, the lantern still burning beside her. Story 18. The Girl in the Attic. In the abandoned Willow Manor, locals whispered about a girl who died trapped in the attic decades ago. John, a skeptic, climbed into the attic to prove nothing was there. As he entered, the air grew icy and faint giggles echoed. Suddenly, cold fingers grabbed his ankle. He saw a pale girl in a torn dress, eyes full of sorrow. She begged for help, but when John tried to flee, the attic door slammed shut. His screams joined the manor's chorus, trapped forever in the shadows with the girl. Story 20. The Blood Vine. In the jungle, vines grew faster than nature should allow. They were alive, hungry, dripping with crimson sap that looked like blood. A research team camped too close, and at night, the blood vines slithered inside tents, squeezing, slicing flesh from bones. It absorbed the pain, growing thicker and stronger. By dawn, nothing remained but twisted vines and shredded clothing. Story 21. The Flesh Puppeteer. A forgotten carnival featured a puppeteer who twisted flesh like marionettes. Visitors who vanished were found with sinews cut and limbs rearranged, their bodies grotesque dolls in the puppeteer's sick display. One survivor escaped, but the puppeteer's hands were inside his mind, pulling strings no one could see. Story 22. The Lurker in the Lake. Locals warned of a beast beneath the lake's surface, its eyes glowing, tentacles writhing in the deep mud. Fisherman Carl dared to dive. He was dragged under, claws tearing through skin and bone. The lake now whispers with his voice, calling others into the watery depths.
The Cave Dweller expanded. The cave had been sealed for centuries, hidden beneath layers of earth and forgotten legends. When a team of spelunkers, Mark, Jenna, Carlos, and Leah, discovered a narrow fissure in the rocky hillside, they couldn't resist. They brought ropes, lanterns, and hope. Inside, the world plunged into an abyssal silence. The air was cold and thick, with the scent of damp stone and something fouler, like decayed flesh. Their lantern beams flickered, barely penetrating the oppressive darkness. At first, it seemed empty, but Mark noticed faint scratch marks on the walls, claw marks too deep to be natural. Jenna found piles of broken bones, gnawed and splintered. The group exchanged nervous glances. Suddenly, a wet sound echoed, a scraping, slithering noise, as if something large was moving just beyond their vision. Carlos whispered, "We're not alone down here." Their flashlights began to fail one by one. Jenna's lantern sputtered and died. The darkness became total. Then came the breathing. Slow, rasping, wet. They heard it move closer, stalking through the cave's twisted passages. Something brushed past Leah's arm. She screamed, but no one could see what touched her. The creature was blind, relying on sound. Its pale, slick skin gleamed under the faint glow of their dying lanterns, and rows of jagged teeth snapped in the black. Mark tried to stay quiet, but a single footstep echoed like a gunshot. The creature pounced. Carlos vanished first, dragged screaming into a narrow shaft. Jenna clawed at the walls, trying to escape, but the beast caught her by the ankle, dragging her to the shadows. Leah and Mark ran blindly, crashing through tunnels until Leah's lantern broke against the stone. Ugly. In the utter darkness, Mark felt cold hands clamp around his throat. His last sight was the creature's maw opening wide, dripping with saliva, teeth glinting like knives. Name. The rescue party found only the empty lanterns and a few shattered bones. The cave remained silent once more, waiting for its next victims. Story 20. The Blood Vine. The jungle had always been a place of mystery, but this particular patch was darker, wetter, and more suffocating than any they'd known. It grew faster than nature should allow, twisting around the towering trees with a hunger that was impossible to ignore. The expedition team, Drive, Emily Carter, biologist Sam Rhodes, and guide Mateo, had come to study rare plant species, but what they found was no ordinary flora. The vines seemed to pulse, writhing like serpents, their leaves glistening red with a sap that looked more like fresh blood than anything botanical. Emily found the source of the sap first, a slit along a thick vine oozing a dark liquid. She dared a taste. The metallic tang burned her tongue, and her vision swam for a moment. At night, the jungle transformed. The blood vines stretched and slithered into their camp, soft but unrelenting, tendrils slipping inside tents, squeezing and slicing with a precision that made the team realize it was hunting. Sam was the first victim. They awoke to his scream, a guttural howl of agony, as the vines coiled tightly around his legs, digging thorns deep into flesh. They pulled him apart slowly, absorbing his screams and draining his life like a predator, savoring the kill. Emily and Mateo fought desperately, hacking at the creeping plants, but for every vine severed, two more grew in its place. By dawn, the forest floor was littered with shredded clothing and bloodied vines, and the blood vine was thicker, stronger, alive with the pain and terror of its victims. The jungle had claimed new blood, and it was only getting hungrier. Story 21. The Flesh Puppeteer. The carnival had closed decades ago, but the faded posters still lined the street corners of the nearby town. Among them, the tale of the Flesh Puppeteer, a man who could twist and shape human flesh like marionettes, persisted like a nightmare that wouldn't die. Detective Laura Myers never believed in such stories until the bodies started turning up. The victims were found in grotesque displays, limbs rearranged, faces frozen in eternal screams, sinews cut and reattached in unnatural angles. It was as if their bodies had been cruelly crafted into monstrous dolls. Laura's investigation led her to an abandoned carnival warehouse where the puppeteer had once worked. The air was thick, with the sickly sweet scent of rotting meat and old paint. Inside, the walls were lined with puppet strings made of sinew and bone. Mannequins hung lifelessly, some half flesh, half canvas. Suddenly, a shadow moved. The puppeteer, his face a patchwork of stitched scars, emerged with blades for fingers. Laura barely escaped, but felt a creeping sensation in her mind, as if invisible strings were pulling her thoughts.
Story 27. The Blackwater Serpent. Blackwater Lake was notorious for swallowing boats whole. Fishermen spoke of a serpent beneath its depths, a black-scaled leviathan with eyes like burning coals. When Marcus took his boat out despite warnings, the water went still. Without warning, massive jaws erupted, crushing his hull. Marcus struggled, but the serpent dragged him beneath the waves, its breath hot and fetid as it tore at his flesh. When the villagers found the shattered boat, only bloody water remained, and a ripple that vanished as quickly as it came. Story 28. The Shadow Man. He was a whisper in the dark, a tall figure with no face, always lurking just beyond the edge of vision. Lena saw him first in the hallway mirror, then in the corner of her bedroom. He followed her, growing closer each night. One evening, the Shadow Man reached out, long fingers stretching like smoke. Lena's skin burned as he passed through, and she screamed as cold darkness filled her chest. By morning, she was gone, leaving only shadows that writhed on the walls. Story 29. The Bone Collector. The woods were a graveyard of missing hikers. No one dared venture there, not after the Bone Collector appeared. A hulking figure made of stitched bones, his hollow eye sockets glowing red. He gathered the remains of his victims to add to his grotesque body. When hikers disappeared, their screams echoed in the forest. One survivor told how the collector crept through the trees, his skeletal fingers reaching for flesh. He left behind nothing but broken bones, and the cold certainty that he was coming back for more. Story 30. The Withered Bride. In the village of Cold Hollow, an old legend told of the Withered Bride, a ghostly woman in a torn wedding dress who roamed the woods, seeking vengeance. Sarah and her friends dared to spend a night near the abandoned chapel where the bride was said to have died on her wedding day, her heart broken. As darkness fell, Sarah heard soft sobbing, and a chill swept through the trees. Suddenly, a pale figure appeared, her skin stretched tight over bone, eyes hollow and bleeding black tears. The bride reached out with icy fingers, dragging Sarah into the dirt. Her breath froze, and Sarah's skin cracked like dry parchment. When dawn came, Sarah's friends found nothing but her torn dress and a patch of frozen earth. Story 31. The Maw of the Marsh. The swamp was a place people avoided, especially after dark. Strange disappearances were blamed on the Maw, a massive swamp monster covered in algae and twisted roots. Jake ventured into the marsh one evening, hunting for rare herbs. The water turned black and thick around him. Suddenly, a huge maw of jagged teeth burst from the mud, snapping shut just inches from his leg. "Bed!" Jake screamed as the creature pulled him under, its grip like crushing vines. He could feel his flesh tearing as it dragged him down into the depths. The next morning, only a bloodied boot was found, floating near the reeds. Story 32. The Lantern Man. On foggy nights near the old lighthouse, sailors claimed to see the Lantern Man, a spectral figure carrying a lantern that burned with unnatural green flames. Emily's grandfather warned her never to follow the light, but curiosity pulled her down to the rocky shore. The Lantern Man appeared, face hidden beneath a tattered hood, his light flickering like a dying ember. He beckoned silently. Emily stepped closer, then felt a cold hand clamp over her mouth. Her screams were swallowed by the mist as she was dragged into the churning sea. Only her lantern, still glowing faintly, was found tangled in seaweed days later. Story 33. The Rottenwood Witch. Deep in the forest, The Rottenwood Witch lived in a hut made of bone and bark. They said she cursed those who took more than they should from the forest. Tom took a branch for his firewood and woke to find his skin rotting, blackening like dead leaves. The witch appeared at his window, her eyes glowing, her mouth filled with sharp, rotten teeth. She whispered curses in a tongue no one understood, and Tom's flesh peeled away, leaving only a skeleton wrapped in bark. The forest claimed him, and the witch's laughter echoed through the trees. Story 34. The Screaming Statue. In the town square stood a statue of a forgotten hero, but at night it screamed. Lily ignored the warnings and touched the statue's cold stone hand. Suddenly, the statue's eyes bled dark ichor, and its mouth opened wide in a silent scream. Invisible hands grabbed Lily, pulling her toward the statue, dragging her flesh against the rough stone. Her screams joined the chorus of those trapped inside the statue, forever part of its silent terror.
Story 35. The Night Crawler. In the forgotten mines beneath Grey Rock Town, miners spoke of the Night Crawler, a slender, elongated creature that slipped through tunnels like a shadow. When Alex ventured inside to retrieve a lost tool, the air turned icy cold. A guttural hiss echoed as something skittered behind him. The Night Crawler's spindly limbs reached out, clawing his skin. It dragged him deeper underground, where the walls were slick with blood and bone fragments. Alex's screams were muffled as the creature's jaws clamped around his throat, silencing him forever. Story 36. The Blood Vine. The Blood Vine was a creeping plant found only in the cursed valley of Raven's Hollow. Laura ignored the warnings and picked a crimson flower, but soon the vine wrapped around her ankle, tightening like a serpent. It climbed her legs, dripping a sticky red sap that burned like acid. Her screams echoed as the vine shredded her flesh, pulling her into the ground. By dawn, only the crimson flower remained where Laura's body once was. Story 37. The Hollowed. The Hollowed were townsfolk who vanished and returned hollow, soulless husks with empty eyes. When Marcus's sister came back from the woods, she whispered nonsense and clawed at her own face, peeling skin like dead leaves. At night, she wandered the streets, her mouth a dark cavern howling for company. Marcus watched in horror as she collapsed, revealing a gaping hole where her heart once was. The Hollowed had taken her, and soon they would come for him. Story 38. The Frostborn. In the Arctic village of Icehaven, legends spoke of the Frostborn, ice demons who drained warmth and life. When an expedition got trapped in a blizzard, the Frostborn appeared, their frozen fingers freezing flesh to ice. One by one, the team turned to living statues, faces frozen in eternal screams. Only one survived, but his heart beat in icy shards, and the Frostborn's curse would never thaw. Story 39. The Lantern Wraith. Along the ancient trade route, travelers feared the Lantern Wraith, a ghostly figure guiding lost souls to their doom. Tom followed the faint glow on a foggy night, desperate for shelter. The Wraith led him to a cliff's edge, its lantern casting shadows like skeletal fingers. Tom slipped, falling into the jagged rocks below. His body was never found, but travelers say his cries can still be heard on windy nights. Story 40. The Iron Maiden. In an abandoned factory, a metal maiden with sharp claws stalked trespassers. Her body was a twisted mesh of rusted iron and broken gears, steam hissing from her joints. When Ethan broke in, she captured him in her iron grasp. Hoagie. Her claws pierced his skin, grinding bone to powder. His mangled remains were found hours later, metal fused with flesh. Story 41. The Veil Walker. The Veil Walker slipped between worlds, hunting souls caught between life and death. Anna saw her first in the hospital, an ethereal figure with hollow eyes and hands like smoke. She whispered promises of peace, but her touch burned like fire. Patients vanished without trace, their bodies drained and hollow. Anna knew the Veil Walker was coming for her next. Story 42. The Rotten Men. The Rotten Men were corpses reanimated by dark magic, their flesh decayed and maggot-ridden. When the graveyard's fence collapsed, they emerged, dragging survivors into the earth. Jamie fought them, but their hands tore at his skin, filling his wounds with crawling larvae. His screams echoed as he joined their ranks, another rotten man in the endless horde. Story 43. The Glass Spider. The glass spider spun webs of razor-sharp crystal, shimmering under moonlight. When Sarah entered the abandoned mansion, she found herself trapped in a cage of sparkling threads. The spider descended, its legs clicking like shattered glass. It bit her neck, injecting venom that turned her veins to crystal. Her body shattered slowly, glowing shards falling to the floor. Story 44. The Corpse Candle. In the marshes, the corpse candle flickered with unnatural light, leading travelers to watery graves. Jake chased the glow, hoping to find his lost friend. The candle led him into deep bogs where hands clawed from the mud. The marsh pulled Jake under, and the candle winked out. Only his echoing screams remained.